Welcome back, Terrorverse fans. This is John Altarelli. We're going to do another little segment on constitutional law. Today we're going to take up the Second Amendment. We'll try to cover the Bill of Rights first, and then we'll move on to other areas. These are going to be short and sweet, hopefully, but just to bring a little bit of background to these rights and these things that are often tossed about in the media and in political discourse without a lot of understanding of what these provisions actually mean. I can't give you the full-blown history and analysis of the Second Amendment. It would take years. Even in law school, we studied it. It's a lot, and the body of law since then has gotten even greater, and the rancor and the amount of discourse around it is large. So I'm just going to try to cover the basics and point out what's out there and give a few comments about my own views on gun laws, and leave it up to you to decide. Now, if you like this content, please subscribe, like, share it, hit the bell for new updates, and give us your comments on whether you like these, should I do more, or you want a clarification on any points that I make, or you want to point out something I might have gotten wrong. I'm not perfect, but I'll do my best. So we'll start with the text of the Second Amendment. I'm just going to read it to you. It's pretty short. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Notice it's state, not country. And the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is one of the 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. It was ratified in 1791. Remember in the last section when I talked about the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, those 10 amendments that are so important to us, mostly about individual rights, could not get incorporated into the original Constitution because there was a battle between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, which the Anti-Federalists were more in favor of states' rights, and the Federalists were more in favor of federal supremacy. If you know much about our history, one of the big issues that was always a concern, and it's still a concern today, is that the government would become too big, tyrannical, which has happened in every single society in history, and we are trying to avoid that. Our whole constitutional system and our form of government was set up to avoid that. It hasn't been successful, because I believe our government has grown far, far beyond what our founding fathers would have liked, and we're seeing some of the problems that comes along with the tyrannical federal government who imposes its will over everything and infringes our individual rights, and also doesn't allow the states to do what the states need to do for the people in their state. As you remember, we were a United States, okay? We're not a country like, America is a name, but at the end of the day, it's a federation of states. And the states were all independent, and they only agreed to get together is if they could maintain a fair amount of their autonomy. That was part and parcel of forming the country. All the states wanted their own sovereignty, and they decided to go together because it's better, it's easier to defend the country, it was easier to sort of do things on a national level. Everyone recognized that, and therefore they realized there was a benefit to putting all the states together. But at the same time, they were never willing or never thought they would have to give up their independence as a state. And if you know much about the Constitution, there's this thing called the 10th Amendment. Anything that's not specifically delegated, under the Constitution is reserved back to the states. I mean, at the end of the day, they had to even make it clear again that that the states are supreme and should be, and they should have the most autonomy. In any event, so this amendment was necessary for a couple of reasons. One, there was still a lot of concern. We just came off of the Revolutionary War. There's been a lot of debate around being protected from a tyrannical government. This actually comes out of the original English Bill of Rights in 89, where Britain actually had something similar to this, where they tried to protect the rights of individuals to bear arms. But it was mostly because of protecting against the government. However, it also has been interpreted and always will be interpreted, because I don't think they ever even had to think about it, is that individuals would have the rights to have arms, even for self-protection, not just to go against the government. And that's sort of where where this debate has shifted. So over the years, there's been lots of cases, and there's been a lot of shifting of the sands underneath the meaning of the Second Amendment. And a lot of the current day commentators like to suggest that, well, we don't need this now. We have a regulated military. We've got police. We've got all this stuff that you didn't have back when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was adopted. And maybe it was necessary then. It's not necessary now. But the Supreme Court over time has not supported that argument. And not just the Supreme Court under Trump with the latest decision under Bruin, but other cases as well. Matter of fact, I'll go over a couple of those cases just to sort of give you where things have gone. So there was a couple of major cases. There was this District of Columbia and Heller in 2008, and this decision made it clear that that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess firearms unconnected to service in a militia. So they made it clear that you don't need to be just in the militia to do this. Although when the term militia was used, every able-bodied, of-age man, or what they call military-age male, was considered to be in the militia. You were always on duty in America. You were always able to be called to fight. So every male was, by right, in the militia, so therefore they had the right to bear arms. Then there was another decision in 2010. Again, these were not under Trump. These were under Obama. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms, applies both to state and local governments, because there was a notion that this only applied to the federal government. And that was a debate, and now that debate has been settled by the McDonnell versus City of Chicago case. And then the latest case that's of any importance is the national, I think it was, New York State Rifle Association and Pistol Association against Bruin. And that was the most recent case in 2022, where the Supreme Court tossed out the New York state and city laws that are very restrictive. So I'm from New York, and I can tell you New York is the hardest place that I am aware of to get a gun permit for a law-abiding citizen. In New York, prior to this Bruin decision, you had to have proper cause to get a gun. So it wasn't by right. They had to look at you. You had to tell them that you had a reason for it. You couldn't use self-defense. That was not a proper cause. Maybe you had to have a jewelry business. I don't know. There's a few things you could use for it. Maybe you're a private eye or something like that. But it was almost impossible for a regular citizen to go in and petition to get a gun permit in New York City in particular under the old standards, because the government had to decide whether you had proper cause or not. Rather than being discounted because you had an issue, whether you were a felon or maybe you had these red flag rules, which, you're sort of mentally unstable, or anything like that. That wasn't the disqualifiers. Those also were disqualifiers. But the other thing is you just had to prove yourself that you were worthy of having a gun, and that was very difficult to get in New York. And even since that rule, New York has pushed a bunch of new rules on there. They don't care about what the Supreme Court said. They're passing new laws that are just as restrictive, maybe worse. And those are going to be challenged, and I'm pretty sure those will be thrown out as well. But in the meantime, New York is still a place where it's impossible or almost impossible to get a gun permit for a law-abiding citizen, yet there's guns in the hands of criminals all day long in New York. So it's kind of weird that the law-abiding citizens can't protect themselves against the criminals who are able to get guns clearly without any problems whatsoever because they're not going to apply for them. So that's the New York situation. And then I just want to cut off from that. They sort of covered, like, there's the bump stock issues around that. There's AR-15 or the sort of assault rifle bans. There's the size of the magazines. And New York has a weird one. They say you can only hold 8 rounds in the magazine. So a lot of states have all these ways of making it so impossible to carry a firearm legally that it's very difficult. So this battle is going to continue to rage, and I think there is some room, in my view, for discussion around reasonable restrictions on gun ownership. Okay, I own guns. I'm a responsible gun owner. My guns are locked in a massive safe. I'm the only one with the combination. If I die, someone's going to have to drill that safe open. None of my children, none of my family, no one could get in there, and I will not allow it. I take full responsibility for protecting those guns. And I'm registered. I have them registered. All of my guns are legal. I'm fine with background checks. I'm fine with them doing red flags if I have a history of mental illness that they might want to prevent me, or at least until I can prove otherwise that I might not be able to have a weapon. I'm fine with all those rules. I'm actually even would go farther. I think people should have to have insurance, just like on an automobile. You ought to have insurance on your weapons. If you have guns and somebody gets hurt with your gun, then you ought to have insurance to compensate the victim. If your guns are used by your family members, or you allow someone to use your guns and they're used in committing a crime, I think you ought to be held liable for some type of crime for allowing that. I'm not sure you should be held liable for a murder if the person does a murder, but there should be a law that says if you are negligent in allowing your gun to be used, then you should have some sort of penalty for that too. And I'm not sure it should be equivalent to murder, but it should be something pretty onerous so that you will be much more careful about locking up your guns. And not buying for 13-year-old kids and stuff like that. And these latest shootings are just abysmal, that the parents have totally failed in their duties and responsibility to keep those guns out of the hands of their children, even when they knew their children had some mental issues that they were a danger to themselves and to others. So I'm in favor of reasonable restrictions around guns. I'm in favor of having them registered. I have no problem with that. We register cars. Why not register guns? As long as our freedom to have them is not abridged. If we can have that, then we can have these other rules in place because they're just helpful to keep the law-abiding people safe in their ownership of guns against the non-law-abiding people. So I'm not against gun regulation. I'm just against the impairment completely of the Second Amendment, and I think that we can find reasonable grounds to deal with this. Yet we never seem to come there because it's either all or nothing on both sides, and that is the typical situation in this country where reasonable people cannot, come up with a middle-of-the-road solution that does what everyone wants because it's just not enough for one side or the other. So anyway, that's the Second Amendment. It's a very important one for people out there, whether you own guns, whether you don't own guns. If you want to be safe in your own environment, you should think about this. And certainly we don't want we don't want guns illegally owned or held by people, and we should do everything we can to stop that. Gun violence is horrific. Gun violence with these mass shootings, but youngsters that are, having some mental issues, horrific. We need to get on top of that. What are the causes of this situation where young guys, particularly young men, feel so disaffected that they think that this is the way to go? And we're the parents on these things. We got to start holding people accountable. We got to start holding parents accountable. I mean, let's face it. If your children are out doing bad things, something's wrong at home. I don't care what you say. I would take responsibility if it was my children. And I know my parents took responsibility for me. They made sure I didn't do bad stuff. And they took their role very seriously in doing their own policing at home, which I think has lost its way in America. And I hope we get it back. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. Again, subscribe, like, share, comment. Tell me more what you want to hear. I'll do it. God bless you. Be safe, please, out there. God bless, and we'll see you on the next version of Constitutional Law Made Easy.